All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining our meeting. This is our April technical training meeting. I've got the agenda here on the screen. Like most of our meetings, just have a couple of training opportunities, and then as you can see there, I've got a list of some topics that we'll be covering in today's meeting. So for the training opportunities, if you're not aware of the National Home Performance Conference next week, it's probably a little too late for you and you don't need to worry about it. And I don't know if anybody's going down to that or not. I know there were a few asks, but anyway, so FYI, that one's happening next week. I think they are doing some webinar sessions. So if that works for you, talk to Brad. And then the other one to have on your calendar, Energy Out West is doing a conference this in August. You can hit up their website. They don't have all the information up yet, but it looks like they're planning on August 1st in Denver, or August 1st through the 5th. So there's that one. Is anybody else aware of any other trainings or anything that this group ought to know about? I know the Rocky Mountain Center for, what do they call it? Occupational Environmental Health. They've been sending me emails. They've got a little broader offering this year. So if you are looking for lead or inspector or RRP stuff, check in with them as well if you need any of that. So, all right. Let's jump into the topics for today. So I have just a few smaller things, and then there's another, the larger item that I want to spend a little bit of time on is that we're going to talk about pre-existing health conditions or addressing pre-existing health conditions. But I want to talk about a product called Aeroseal, a little clarification on asbestos testing, and then I want to talk about some changes to our HVAC repair versus replacement rule, the Seer ratings on AC, and then we'll jump into that pre-existing health condition. And then we'll finish up with just a little bit on where we're at on the CAS policy. So anybody have anything else that they've been dying to know about or talk about before we jump into these topics for today?
Hey, Turner, have you taken a stab at what we talked about?
With the CAS stuff?
Yeah. Oh, is that okay?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So Jesse brought that up, and I'll talk briefly about it, and then I'll be there will be more on it to come. So that should hopefully answer your question, Jesse. So, all right.
We can. Whoa. All right. Somebody's got to turn their speakers off, guys.
Psychedelic.
The infrastructure money numbers were released. For those of you that haven't been paying attention or got a notification from the feds about it, Utah got 21.69 million out of the infrastructure fund. Right now, the stuff just got published last week when I was on vacation, so I have not read through the rules. And I also have a meeting with executive management next week to discuss some of that. So not any real information for you other than a number. But again, the plan hasn't changed. We're going to spin it out slow over the next 10 years is my plan. You can do some very simple math, and 21 million divided out over 10 years, that is a number that is very, very similar to about what we get annually from DOE right now anyway. We're somewhere around that 2.3, 2.5 million range annually from DOE. So that is a nice steady pace. We won't have to expand dramatically like we did in 2009. But the reason we're taking that approach is we will still be seeing the annual allocation from DOE every year on top of this infrastructure money. And so that's part of the reason we're taking this approach. So just keep that in mind, what impact that's going to have. Like I said, as more details become available, we'll meet as the leadership of the program and discuss those particulars.
You may have any questions on that? Oh, thank you. I meant to give you some time for that. So
I just made some and took it.
perfect. So the big gob of money's coming. All right. I think some of you have heard of this product. Many of you may have heard of this product. But if you haven't, there's a product out there called Aeroseal, and they basically do like they'll go into a house and seal up the duct system, and they can also seal up a house, but I don't think that probably isn't going to fit into our program. And anyway, it probably won't ever fit into our program. I don't know. We'll see. But Dalton introduced me to this product a few years ago, and he was interested in it and wondered if it would ever work. And ever since then, we've been wondering if somebody would give it a try. Well, 6 County gave it a try, and Dalton and I both got to go see it. Dalton's away on I think he's just having a vacation, by the way, so he's not with us today. But anyway, Dalton and I went down there. We happened to be down monitoring, and so we stopped in to check out what they were doing with the Aeroseal. And I shot a really terrible video, so I'm just gonna hit play on it while I'm talking. There's really no audio, nothing to listen to, but basically they have an air compressor in the truck. They set this piece of equipment up closer to the house, and that equipment has it's got some nozzles in it that basically the nozzles heat up. They shoot compressed air through it, and they put some goo into the system, and they vaporize the goo. So the goo goes through this white tube, and they basically tie that white tube into the duct system. So in this house, you can see
We're putting the technical meeting goo.
Well, I want to call it Elmer's glue because that's what it looks like and kind of what it smells like. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's all it is, but they charge $200 a bottle for it. But basically that they just use that, it's like a 4 or 6 mil plastic tube, and they just tie it in the duct system. Here they just took this like a mobile home downdraft, so they just tied it right in where the ducting connects to the furnace, so that they could blow that mist into the duct system. And then once they have their system set up, they run some, a pre-test to see just what the duct leakage looks like. And sorry for the Blair Witch Project here, and then this is them hard at work. They sit at the kitchen table and stare at the computer for about 45 minutes. But it's kind of cool. It just simply runs a mist into the system, and that mist, it starts to build up on all the little edges where air leakage is happening on the duct system, and it will slowly seal up the duct. So I apologize, I didn't get a picture of the front of the house so you could wrap your mind around what that looked like. So I just drew a quick sketch of it. It's just the house we were in was just a double wide modular, and it was sitting on a permanent crawl space foundation, like a block foundation or masonry, I can't remember which. But the crawl space was about 4 or 5 feet tall. It was a decent sized crawl space to work in. And then the weatherization guys, we ran some pre-tests and some post-tests as well. We wanted to know if it would affect the static pressure on the duct system, so we did pre and post static. And we also just did with our duct blaster, we did total leakage and leakage to the outside. I've got all those numbers, but I figured I didn't want to confuse you because we did all that at 50 Pascal of pressure, and Aeroseal did their testing at 25. So I'm just going to show you Aeroseal's numbers. I did double check. All of the numbers are right in line with the numbers we got at 50. But so their report, you can see this is what they hand to their client when they're done. They tested before, and they measured 496 CFM of leakage, and then you can see on the chart it says that's at 25 pascals. So if you look at that, you have to think about that for a minute. They're obviously reporting total leakage. This is not the leakage to the outside. This is total duct leakage throughout the system. But it was right in line with the measurements we got once you convert that from 25 to 50. And then when they were done, they got that down to 33.6 CFM of leakage at 25. So they got a 93% reduction on the duct leakage. Now you'll notice, so this is kind of what they see on their computer. It just starts charting, you know, how leaky the duct is, and they watch that, and they watch the temperature of the goo nozzles and a few other things, and it's kind of cool to watch. But so we were at about the 45, 50-minute mark here, and they started getting nervous because it started to level off, and they weren't anywhere near where their target should be. I think they, and anybody from 6 County, you can correct me on any of this stuff, but I think they kind of guaranteed a 90% reduction or something like that. So when they hadn't, they'd only gotten, I think we went from 500 down to 300, so we only had a 200 CFM reduction there. They shut the machine off. They started crawling around in the crawl space. They found a couple of areas, and as you can see, they got a 200 CFM reduction by going down and sealing up some large holes that they had missed on their initial assessment. They kicked the machine back on for another 10 minutes, and they brought it down to where they wanted to be. So kind of interesting, kind of cool, kind of expensive. I think this cost around $1,600, but auditors out there, if you've ever run a full duct blaster test and put that into the audit, you know that some situations will give you a couple $1,000s to do duct sealing on. So in this case, it worked well. They had more than an SIR of 1, and they got some really good duct sealing. And also, this is going to affect your infiltration or your air sealing numbers. So in addition to just getting that duct sealing done, this dropped their blower door from 2,000 to just over 1,500. So they got a 24% infiltration reduction on the whole house just by sealing off the duct. So, which you would expect. We know that that's there should be a direct correlation there as well. But, and then the static pressure, I was expecting the needle to move more than it did. The needle moved like not at all. This really didn't move the static pressure on this furnace one bit. I'd be curious if others try this out. I'd really want to watch that and make sure that it's not affecting static pressure on our duct systems, because if this, you know, we could cause some other problems. But anyway, there's some information. Aeroseal is not the only company out there that does this. I found one other company that does this, but if it's something that you've ever been interested in, you need to follow all your procurement rules. Like you would deal with a company like this just like any other subcontractor. You've got to get a few bids and make sure that you're following all those rules. But it is something that worked in this one situation. Now, one thing that I noticed is that I think that there would have been problems if there hadn't been enough room to get down in the crawl space and fix that larger duct leakage. So, you know, I think that the guys that came out to do this Aeroseal, they learned a few lessons. I could see them mentally kind of scoping which jobs would work for them and which would not, and things like that. So I'm sure that would be an evolving process with a subcontractor. But the one thing I really did like about this is that this agency hired a subcontractor, and they paid the subcontractor based on getting an actual reduction, which is something we don't have that in our program. We send our guys out with a budget to do air sealing, and by the time they've spent their budget, we hope they hit their target. This company came out and said, we will hit this target for this much money, and that's what they did. So it's kind of cool to see. Anyway, any questions for me or for 6 County on this one?
Have we looked into how much it costs just to purchase the machine and do it ourselves?
And what'd you learn?
No, I was asking you if you know how
Well,
much.
did
if you
we?
could.
I got you. So these guys, the guy that came out and did this actually used to be part of the weatherization program down there, Jason Ogden, if any of you know him. He is now this Aeroseal guy. And they were very open. He and his business partner were very open about what it cost. They invested $75,000. They bought the Shinola package that came with everything. They said that you could get into it for closer to 30, but both of those don't seem like option. I don't know, that they seem fairly expensive. I think we'd be better off exploring this with some subcontractors for a little while first. That's kind of where I'd land on it. So, any other questions? All right. So be very careful with it. If it's something you are interested in, you want to make sure you've got plenty of room in your duct sealing budget. And feel free to reach out to me, or I can put you in touch with the folks in 6th County if any of that would help on something like that. So, okay. Next thing I want to talk about is asbestos testing. So if you read through our guidelines, we do allow asbestos testing of vermiculite. So if you get into a home and there is some vermiculite insulation in walls or in attics, you and that the presence of that vermiculite is preventing you from some major energy savings. Like, you'd be able to insulate an attic and save the client a lot of money, then you really should be considering having that vermiculite tested. But that's the only thing that you can use weatherization funds to test when it comes to vermiculite. You don't test siding, you don't test any of the suspected asbestos on ductwork or anything. It's only vermiculite. But I had a couple questions come up recently, and then I talked to some others about it, learned a few things, and then of course a week later DOE put out some new guidance. And as I was reading through the guidance, I noticed that DOE got very specific about this asbestos testing. So DOE says that if the person collecting the sample must be AHERA certified. So if any agencies out there have done otherwise, stop. You should not be collecting your own asbestos at all. The person doing that must be AHERA certified tester. And I'm not sure if that's cost effective for our program. So like, I did a quick search yesterday because the Rocky Mountain Center, they are offering asbestos inspector class coming up in June, but it's like $505 for a 3-day course. And then you have to be registered, kind of like lead, you have to be a registered firm with the Division of Environmental Quality, and that's going to cost your agency $275 a year. Plus, you'd also have some liability insurance costs that would probably go up higher than what you currently have. So I'm not sure if it's the right investment. If the information I've been getting back, I've heard from a couple agencies that have done the testing that they're doing like 1 to 3 tests a year. So as long as that's the case, I don't think it's worth having anybody go get AHERA certified, because really all that would allow you to do would allow you to go out and do the sampling, where you'd collect the vermiculite from a couple of locations and then you'd send it to a lab. You still end up paying the bulk of the cost on this test is the lab fee. So anyway, not sure if the economics are there yet for what we're running into, but I just wanted to let you guys know a couple of things. So I guess the first one is clear down here at the bottom. When you send out the lab, or when you get the vermiculite tested, the lab will send you back results, and they are basing those results off of a national standard. And that standard is that they don't say there's 0 asbestos containing material. They say whether or not there's less than 1%. So your lab results are going to come back and it's going to say the yes or no that there was less than 1% of asbestos containing material in it. And so that's what we have set our standard at. And it's not in the guidelines now. It will be in the guidelines on July 1, but that is the standard, that if you get lab results back that it says it's less than 1% ACM, then you're allowed to insulate over that vermiculite. And then the other thing I want to make sure everybody's aware of is that the Division of Environmental Quality here in Utah, they publish a list of all the people that are AHERA certified. And it looks like they keep that list up to date pretty well. So I'm just going to click into their website and show you where I found that list. It's right here. There's a bunch of these plus minus things. You just, expand this one that says professional asbestos service providers in Utah. I was talking with an auditor, and they had found somebody, but the price was really, really high. So their agency wasn't really even trying to do asbestos testing. But the price seemed so high, I pulled up the list and I called one company that served their area. And that guy told me for $300, they'd come out, they'd do the sampling, they'd send it to the lab, and they'd send the results. So I only called one company. I don't know if you'll get a mixed bag of other results, but for about $350, one of these certified asbestos companies, and let me just pull up the list of the companies here. So we're looking for one of the companies that has an I next to it for inspection. So you can just scroll through the list and reach out to some of these companies that do offer the inspecting. And hopefully you can find somebody who could serve your area for a reasonable cost. But also be aware, like the last time they updated this was in February. Like they do keep this up to date and pretty current, it looks like. So somebody just on the chat mentioned that something about $220. Looks like that was their experience. So I better pull up the chat here so I can see what y'all are saying. So Burl said they used Aerolite for $220. Angela from Salt Lake said they just got results back from Asbestos Abatement of Utah for about $350. Cool. Thank you guys for that. So anyway, hopefully that'll help you guys. I don't know if any of you have struggled with that, but it's deq.utah.gov, and then there's a big long URL, but I've just found it by searching for DEQ Utah and asbestos, and it'll take you right here. So any questions on that? All right, and again, if there's really not much opportunity to save any energy, the juice is not worth the squeeze. But if you get into those homes where you could insulate the whole attic, you could add 8 or 10 inches, and it's really going to save the client some money. If you'll go down that road, you could really help them out a bit. So if your agency has a policy to not do that, be aware of what your agency policies are. Like if your agency and your leaders are feeling like that's something they do not want you guys to be doing, that should be included in your state plan and things like that. But just be aware of what your agency's policies are there. So, okay. The next item is some guidance on the HVAC repair versus replace. So I think if I were to ask all the auditors on the call, they would tell me that the rule on furnaces is 15 years old or older, and we just swap them out. And that rule was kind of an exception to a rule, and it's basically become the rule across the board. No, it's not that bad, but we do replace a lot of furnaces because they're 15 years old or older. One thing that some of you may be surprised to know is that is a rule that applies only to LIHEAP money. So if you get into, well, LIHEAP and Dominion money, if you get into section B8 says you can replace a furnace or repair a furnace with an SIR of 1 or greater with DOE money, or you can use LIHEAP and Dominion money, and then under all of the other following rules. And one of those rules is if the furnace is 15 years old or older, and then you can replace it. But what I think some have forgotten is that that applies only to 80% efficient furnaces. And I think what some may be surprised to know is that that does not apply to the crisis program at all. The 15-year rule does not apply to the crisis program. The crisis program has this HVAC cost limit, repair versus replace limit schedule here, where you're going to repair it, or your repair costs would be a percentage calculated against a new 90% single stage. And if the furnace is 1 to 5 years old, then you can spend up to 40% on repairs. Once you pass the 40% threshold, then you should replace it. 6 to 10, it's the threshold's at 25%, and then 11 plus, the threshold is just $400 in repairs, and beyond that, you should just replace the furnace. So I know some of you understand that very clearly and have been following that. I have been seeing more and more BWRs where I've been scratching my head a little bit, wondering if there's some issues here. But I say all of this to show you the change that we've made to this rule. So this change will go into effect on July 1st, and you'll notice that the crisis rule does not change. We're going to bring the guidance in section B8 that covers LIHEAP and Dominion funding. We're going to bring that into alignment with the crisis rules. So the clarification here is that it's a malfunctioning forced air system. So there needs to, first and foremost, there needs to be something wrong with the system. Now, it doesn't need to be completely broken and not working. We picked the word malfunctioning on purpose. So if there is something wrong with the furnace, then you can head down this road. But malfunctioning forced air systems, the decision to repair or replace existing systems should be based on the following HVAC repair cost limits. And so, we've created this new term, HVAC repair cost limits, and we just mirrored what's under the crisis program. So now the funding sources are using the same cost limits. So again, 40, 25, and 400. And then there's an important piece of this that I have yet to see. I've seen a couple of auditors do this well, and then a lot of what I'm seeing, it's not being done very well at all. And so this is something I'll be watching closely over the next couple of years. And that is that it says the justification to repair or replace the system must include a repair cost limit comparison. And what that is whenever you're making this comparison, you actually need to document it. And so what does that look like? It's not that complex. You don't have to have like this detailed itemization or anything. I just wrote one yesterday just to show you what that could look like. So this would be the heating tab on an audit, and this is a neat audit. If we had a forced air system and we were going to replace this because the repair costs were greater than the age and the threshold. So, I have selected that the high efficient replacement is mandatory. I've renamed this one as an NAM. And then the comment section is where you would put that cost justification. So here in the comment section, I wrote replace furnace because cost to repair is more than 25% of replacement cost. 8-year-old furnace with a cracked heat exchanger. And then the cost comparison you're doing this on is the materials only. So it says cost to replace the heat exchanger. The materials on that would be $1,287, and the materials to replace the furnace would be about $2,000. So let me go back to this because that is an important part of this. It's both of these, the repair cost limits are based on materials only. So when you're doing that, if this is causing problems for anybody, this is something we could talk about. when I've done a few of these, I found that when you do materials only, it tends to lean or tip your hand a little towards replacement versus repair. But anyway, we've basically just mirrored that that standard to apply to our LIHEAP standard. Questions, concerns? So this goes into effect on July 1st, which means auditors, if you've audited something yesterday, tomorrow, the 15-year rule still applies. But I would encourage you to start getting away from it, because on July 1st, I will hold you to this standard. So, all right, no questions? Does everybody feel comfortable with it? Is this going to cause anybody major problems? All right, I'm either like got my volume down or I'm not hearing anything. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was our AC SEER rating. Some of you may or may not know that the standard SEER rating for our program has been a 17 SEER. I've noticed most of you have your setup libraries set to a 17 SEER for your replacement ACs. But as I got looking at that recently, I realized a couple of things. First off, I realized that there was no guidance at all for DOE and LIHEAP AC ratings. And the SEER rating, really, that guidance is only under our crisis program. And so that was one thing I realized. The other thing I realized is that the agencies that have been trying to get their equipment to a 17 SEER, and just the HVAC industry in general, the tendency is there are some situations where you can take a 16 SEER AC, and if you match it up with the right equipment and coil, then it can meet a 17 SEER rating. But the problem with that is it gets very, very technical, and the stars really have to align in order for you to get to that SEER rating. And so one option is that we require documentation showing that every one of these systems actually gets to that 17 SEER, or the other option is that we just require 16 SEER. And so for July 1, I've changed the language to 16 SEER. Your repair costs, so the AC in the crisis program has a similar guide. So you're going to compare that to a new 16 SEER, and the 16 SEER should be our standard for replacement. And then I've also added that same language and requirement to the LIHEAP and DOE guidance. Everybody comfortable with that one? Anybody have any questions or concerns about that?
I actually like that better because no one down here seems to stock 17 SEER, and everybody has 16 SEER, so it makes our life much easier.
Yeah, well, the jump in price from 16 to 17, like a legitimate 17 SEER AC, is pretty big as well. And that's why a lot of them will take the 16 SEER and try to match it up with the equipment, because it ends up being a lot more cost effective. But even those, as I did a little research and found it can be very difficult to get all the right parts in place to make it a true 17 SEER. So instead of killing ourselves on that one, we feel really good about just going after a 16 SEER on that. So
you can go to AHRI website, and it'll put in like your equipment you're using, and it'll tell you which ones you need to use to reach your SEER ratings. But I like 16 SEER better.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I thought about, was having basically saying, all right, we want the HARI certificate showing that this equipment all meets this or something. But yeah, I think this one will work better for our program. If we see some advances or anything, or want to raise the bar at some point in the future, we can definitely do that. But
what about window mounts?
I think window mounts have I I think the best SEER rating on those, or the average, was like a 12 or a 13.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, our guidance says we don't replace window mounts.
Correct.
You can do you can do some like minor tuning and cleaning on them, but that's it. So if you get into those situations, we're not evaluating to be replacing any of those.
Okay. Thanks.
So, yep. Any other questions on it? All right. Okay. I know everybody out there pays like so much attention to these meetings that this slide is going to just be familiar. This was a slide that I had in our August meeting of last year. And all it was these were the top 5+1 items that we were going to focus on this year. And I just wanted to use the slide to point out that the +1 was addressing pre-existing health conditions. It was something we had an error rate on our audits for the last few years on it. And I knew that we needed to create a new form and a couple of things. I thought we had this solved with the new health and safety form that I put out a little while ago, but then DOE gave us new health and safety guidance. And as we went to align everything with that, I realized that we weren't quite there yet. So we do have another new form. And the new draft health and safety form that I put out a month or 2 or 3 ago is going to have to undergo some modifications, but that's a discussion for another day. But what I want to talk about today is just this requirement that we have to address pre-existing health conditions. And I wanted to show you the new form and show you how we'll use it. But basically we put this new form together to make sure that it aligns with everything in DOE's new health and safety guidance, which is they put out a program notice 22-7, and it's got some very specific things they want on this form or on this documentation. So if anybody's not sure what I'm talking about yet, hopefully this will help a little bit. So we currently use this stuff over here on the left-hand side of the screen, and that's that applicant health and safety evaluation. So all of your weatherization applicants, they're getting this in their packet, they're filling it out, and sometimes they check a box that they have dizziness or asthma or something else. And currently auditors are supposed to look at that, and then when they're out in the house, they need to have a discussion with the client. And if there are any pre-existing conditions that could be made worse by weatherizing their homes, we are required to come up with a plan to prevent that from happening. And usually that means that the client that maybe has asthma or whatever, they'll be out of the home, or they'll leave the home while you guys are doing the work that's going to cause dust or whatever. So that's kind of what it looks like right now. This really shouldn't be any major change to that, but let me just put the form up on the screen and we'll just take a close look at it. Shouldn't be any major change to that, but we realized that the old form had a bunch of other data points on there that we don't ever do anything with. And we don't really need to collect it, but we do need to collect this one data point. And so we figured we'd try to make a form that would make that clearer and hopefully easier for you guys to use. So the idea is that this will replace, so I was calling that other form I for intake, I07. That's the way we've listed that on our field guide, or sorry, our standard file format. That's number I07. So this will replace that. This will become the new I07 form. So your clients should get this in their packet when they're applying for weatherization. And all they're doing is they're putting their name and their address, and they're answering this question, which says, do you or a member of your household have any known or suspected health concerns that could be made worse by exposure to any of the materials or risks listed above? And you can read through this as well, but basically it says this is a list of risks, known risks associated with having your home weatherized. And it says, here's some possible potential allergens, and here's some things you'll be exposed to, like power tools. We may disturb some mold. We may have some temporary debris in the way, dust, noise, odors. So basically, then we're just asking them, do you have any known or suspected health concerns that would be made worse by being exposed to any of these things? If they check no, that's it. We're done. If they check yes, then they need to describe what that is below. And then, as it says here, a member of our staff will discuss any concerns listed during the initial home assessment or the home energy audit, and will work with you to develop a plan to minimize the risk. So if the client writes stuff, checks yes, and or writes stuff here, then the energy auditor's job is to now have that discussion with them and fill out the bottom of the form with them. So the bottom of the form, hopefully this is familiar to you guys. This looks kind of like the worst case draft test, but this is where we would write our occupant health risk prevention plan. And it just says this is to be filled out by the agency when plan to prevent risk is needed. So the client may or may not have written down what the risk is very coherently. So there's a spot down here for the agency to rewrite that or to summarize that if they want. So to prevent the following health risks, so you'd write down what the health risk is. The weatherization agency will, you write down what you will do, and then the client will, and you write down what the client will be responsible to do. And then there's a section for any notes. So if you need to expound upon any of that or just make any general notes about it. And then there's a client sign off and date and an agency rep sign off and date. And then this part that I skipped over here in the middle, it includes your agency information. And right up here, so there is a spot for the client to sign. So the client is signing, it says, I'm aware of the risks associated with weatherization. I've carefully read and accurately answered the questions above. So they're signing that they answered this question and that they understand everything up above and dating that. So they're signing that when they fill out their application. And then the client, if you do have to come up with a plan, the client does need to sign a second time, indicating that they're agreeing with that plan. So this signature and date is required, specifically required by DOE in their new health and safety guidance. This signature and date is specifically required. This whole plan is specifically required. And much of the language that we use here and all of this is specifically required by DOE. The other thing that is specifically required by DOE is that your agency contact information must be on this form. And so that's why we've built this form with a spot for your agency's information right there. So I'll when I send this form out, I will send it out so that this space will be blank and that your agency will be able to put that information there. If your agency does not have good software to do that, I'm happy to help with that. It's not that big a deal. I can help put your info there and give you a form that you guys can then use. But you'll need to reach out to me for help with that.
One thing, if your agency is putting paper or other documents in a client's hand, you need to start moving towards that. Everything needs to have your agency's contact information on it. Matt and myself have been going through and we're trying to strip off as much of the stuff on the forms that had our information on it or whatever. You're going to need to start working on that. That is becoming the new standard. Your documentation must be specifically branded for your agency.
Cool. Any questions on all of this or concerns about how it might work or anything like that? Or has anybody noticed that we're missing anything here? Because you guys are out there in the real world. I just made this staring at my computer. So I
Well,
don't
sometimes that form, you have to make sure your workers get that form also. It doesn't just stop at the audit. So the workers, when they go out to do the work, they need to know what the plan is.
Thank you, Scott. That is exactly right. This is the form itself is actually a step backwards. It's less invasive, if you will, from the original form. I said, we're not asking them a bunch of questions. This entire concept or the shift from DOE is predicated on it is the client's responsibility to disclose to us. We are attempting to make them aware of what we believe are the hazards associated with the work we do. Okay. And then it's the client's responsibility to disclose. As Mr. Bolander just pointed out, we have provided you the form. We have provided information about developing a plan. There is an expectation that there will be a plan to mitigate that hazard if the client does disclose. Just like lead or vermiculite or any other known hazard in the home, the agency must have internal controls and process to ensure that everybody is aware of that. So again, I didn't know, I forgot, the dog ate my homework answers. When a client files a complaint and we didn't follow the plan, that is, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You will lose. So you have to implement things on your own. We've given the base, which is this form, to collect the information, obtain the signatures required to document it. You all have to build out that other part of the process internally with your workflow.
I've seen some really good work orders that have that listed, right? Like anytime there's been a health and safety plan, like they've been doing a great job of putting, especially when it comes to that measure that's going to be affected by that plan. I've been seeing some where there's that notice to the workers that's when they need to let the client know they've got to leave the home or whatever.
And this
So-
will include contractors as well, not just your in-house crews. The contractor must adhere to the plan, no different than your own staff.
Can I ask a quick question about this? So some of these changes will require an update in my policy manual that we just submitted. Are we able to make those changes now, even though we've already submitted the draft?
That you're talking about your application stuff,
Yeah,
point in time.
okay,
That was your policy and the documentation at the time of the application. No different than the stuff we submit to DOE. We amend and change our guidelines throughout the course of the year. No different than DOE amends the rules to the program. It's all point in time. What's important, as Matt pointed out, and he's reiterated multiple times throughout this technical meeting, is when things take effect, so that everybody knows when this change went into place. And therefore, when we're monitoring or you're doing an internal control check or whatever, everybody understands that this is what was supposed to have been applied to this specific client file, whether it be by work start date, production start date, so on down the line.
So I had intended on putting this form out today. But again, the effective date on this will become July 1. But I would encourage you guys to put it in play now and work out any kinks or bugs, or help us work out any kinks or bugs with it in between now and then. So,
and that's just part of this approach that we've been using for years, which is, we go through these development phases, we release drafts to you, we ask you all to take it out for a test drive and see where the wheels will fall off so that we can make it right. But that actual hard implementation date is always several months down the road. It gives everybody plenty of time to react. Some take advantage of that time. Others, well, we help them.
awesome. Anybody have any other questions about this? And as you start using it, just direct your questions to me. I'm sure there's something I've overlooked here, and we'll need to iron it out a little bit. But anyway, so that's coming your way.
So Matt,
Yeah, go ahead.
just to clarify, so that very bottom box there, if the client puts no, then those last two signatures are not required then?
That is correct, yes. And I hope that's I hope I've made that clear to, and again, that's a great thing to be looking at on any of these forms. If you guys are reading forms and you're like, man, this just does not make sense, or it really needs to be clarified, because we want our forms to be audit ready. We want a reasonable person to be able to look at this form and go, okay, this was completed, and that this was all that was required. So I did put the language there to be filled out by agency when plan to prevent risk is needed, so that indicates this section doesn't, if there is no need, then it shouldn't need to be filled out. But if you guys see that, or just see other ways to make that kind of stuff clearer, make on any of those suggestions that you would like. But yeah,
Matt made a good point there too. He mentioned audit ready. In this new guidance, this batch of guidance that started coming out around December from DOE, whether it was with training, health and safety, and other stuff, reoccurring theme was the completeness of forms, the need that the form contained all the client information and signature and agency information as well. And so I would encourage all of you again, that has been an eternal struggle in this program in the 13 years I've been around, is to get people to fill out forms completely. I can, just like the NFL, I can tell you in program year 22, it will be a point of emphasis. So you can take the hint now, or you can get the letter later. I don't really care. I do care, but it's going to, I'm just telling you now, it will be something that will be examined closely. And the expectation is that the forms will be done. And if the forms are not getting filled out completely and they make it through a QCI, then that is again telling the state that an accurate, complete QCI was not done, because that should be something that's caught during QCI.
Any other questions? All right. The last thing that I had for today's meeting was just, oh yeah, so this form will go away. That's the new one. Is this blank slide that I have here that says CAS policy. So last fall, we had I think it was a coordinator meeting, or it was expanded. It was a technical meeting. I think a lot of you were in the room, where we talked about how to deal with a CAS that has air from the outside, or outside combustion air, and whether it's I threw this squiggly thing up on the board, I think, during that meeting, and we had a long discussion about how to deal with existing isolated CASs that can be easily isolated, and CASs that cannot be isolated. I promised some policy on it, and I haven't delivered. Jesse reminded me earlier this week. I've got a really good draft started, but it's not quite ready to send your way. I'm gonna hopefully wrap it up today or tomorrow and send it out to you. So basically, I'll be sending it some draft guidance on it. It may include a chart, but when I send that out, will you guys take a look at it and then bounce it against what you're actually dealing with in the real world, and let me know if the guidance works. But it'll just really be based off of the discussions that we had in that session. And I have gotten questions from a few of you, a little bit of feedback since then, that I'll make sure that it fits in and works with that as well. So, but I apologize for not getting that to you sooner. It's been a long time, but since we talked about it, but I'll see if I can get that wrapped up this week and out to you. Will that work? Everybody okay with that? Any questions on that? Cool. That's all I have for the meeting. Anybody have anything else before we close? All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you guys for all that you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.